Would sometimes there be punishment for things that you didn't know what you had done wrong?
Yes.
And you talked before about your mother's tantrums or rages. Did your mother have tantrums or rages?
Yes.
And how far back do you remember seeing that kind of behavior by your mother?
Since I can remember.
And did those rages stop at some point in time?
No.
Did they get worse as time went on?
Yes.
And what would she be like when she was in a rage?
Like she's trying to hold back and is not able.
Someday my pain, someday my pain will mock you, harness your blame, harness your blame, walk through.
This whole issue is being blown out of all proportion, that somehow there's some linkage between molestation, if there was one, and the killings that occurred in this case, that there's somehow, if the defense proves there is a molestation or has been a molestation, that somehow that establishes a defense in the case. That doesn't prove anything. Doesn't prove anything as far as a legal defense.
Silence my game stars. You swing wide your crane. Swing wide your crane. Run me through. And the stories all over you. In the morning I'll call you. Can't you find a clue? When your eyes are all painted Sinatra blue.
Well, it certainly proves that when our clients testify that it was the threat to expose this molestation that brought about the death threats from their parents, that maybe they'll be believed.
I'm not talking about that aspect of it. I'm talking about whether or not, in fact, there was a molestation. That doesn't constitute a legal defense.
Well, we don't say that it does, Your Honor, but the mere fact that there was molestation constitutes a legal defense. We have never said that. We have never said that because you're abused, you're justified in killing your abuser. We didn't argue that, and we never will. But we will show that with the effects of molestation are on children, and it is a critical sub-issue in this case that our clients, when they testify to their sexual exploitation, are believed. Our experts will testify that these kinds of terrorizing experiences on young children don't just build up over the years or get stored as memory. That children faced with, later in life, even as adolescents, even as young adults, when they're faced with a situation where the person who has terrorized them appears to be threatening, they re-experience these earliest traumatic events.
Someday my pain, someday my pain will mock you.
Don't get us wrong, I think it's very obvious that Eric Menendez adores his brother and idolizes him and feels very guilty that through his going to Lyle for help, they've both been in jail for 3.5 years and maybe in jail the rest of their lives. And I think he feels a great deal of guilt about that he expressed here, and he certainly expressed it in the tape recording that you heard, and he certainly expressed it to Dr. Vickery, and it's just, it's real. This was the idolized big brother, and I think something else that you may have seen. When Lyle was testifying about his life, Eric was hysterical. At the council table, and it got real bad there at one point where we asked for a recess. When Eric was listening to Lyle talk about Lyle's suffering and Lyle's pain and Lyle's fear, Eric became completely hysterical. When Eric got on the witness stand and talked about his own, he didn't. And there seems to be a very special bond there where Eric cares in some way, I think, more for Lyle than he does for himself, which would, of course, be the family tradition.
Do you have a lot of nice memories from your childhood?
No.
Did sports become an important part of your life?
Well, they were everything to my dad, and that was my whole life.
Was doing what your father wanted of you important?
That's what made him happy, and that's what I wanted to do.
Why did you want to make him happy?
So he would love me.
How old were you when you started swimming?
I think 4 years old. In the summer it was every day, and in the spring probably almost every day. But in the winter it was whenever the classes were, the practices was just like 3 times a week. And then sometimes my dad would take me on his own. But with my dad, it was very, it was one-on-one, and he'd stay in the pool with me and swim next to me, and sometimes we would play, or it would just be him and I for, usually they gave you an hour. It was like hour free time swimming, and I would take that time to train with my dad. So, sometimes it was good.
And sometimes it was bad? And what was it like when it was bad?
Well, I didn't really like the swimming. And sometimes he was rough with the swimming. It was like they were just drills, and I would swim laps, and sometimes he would just yank me out of the water by my hair, and he would shake you, and he took it very, very seriously. He had all kinds of different methods, and how to expand your lungs, and how long I should be able to hold my breath. And we practiced him holding me under the water, how long I could take it. We would go under, and I would fight him to get air, and then he would give me air.
What do you mean you would fight him to get air?
I would just push away from him or pinch him or do whatever I could, hit him underwater. That's what he wanted me to do. He wanted me to fight to get air so that I could go beyond what I would normally just take if he said stay underwater as long as you could. And I didn't like the water. It was always very cold, and it was, for some reason, I didn't like it.
How would you feel when you finally got up to the surface?
Just relieved to get air. I would be crying. This would be very rough, like I said, and
And what ages were you when these exercises were going on?
I'm not sure, but by between 6 and till about 10, I would say, maybe a little bit longer. The whole thing was very bad for me, and mostly I remember pleading with my mother not to take me, stalling so I would be late, incredible stomach aches where I would be nauseous and I would vomit. I was pretty crazed about the swimming. It made me so nauseous and nervous. The drilling, the intensity, the underwater stuff was very hard for me. I remember purposely swimming into the wall in practice so that I would be injured, so that the coach would say, okay, you can sit in the locker room and miss the afternoon sessions.
Did you start playing soccer at some point in time?
Yes.
How long did you play soccer?
Until I was in my 11 years old, between almost 12. No, my dad was there whenever I played soccer. In practices, he would be very involved, and the coaches would allow that. Pretty much it would be like a private lesson with him, and then the team was playing also. He would be yelling things from the sidelines. Sometimes he would come out and grab me and take me off the field and talk to me and put me back in.
Well, his father would come to most of the games, and his father did show up at some practices. Domineering, he spoke with an accent, and the one thing I remember, he would always yell loud, get the ball, get the ball. It wasn't even conducive to the team because I would like the players to play in position and not to leave their position to go after the ball. And he didn't always understand this, but he had this repetitive term, loud, get the ball, and he would go up and down the sidelines. He expected his son to give everything he had and some. Right away when the whistle blew for the halftime, he would head right for Lau. The team would come towards me. He would head for Lau often with a towel, dry him off. He actually, this is a little crude to say, but he actually treated Lau almost like he was a thoroughbred racehorse, the way he would towel him down at halftime and after the game. Often the players and the families would stay around, mill around for half an hour after the game, 45 minutes. But the Menendez family was out of there as quickly as possible.
Did he mix with the other boys socially that were on the team?
Not really.
Was he pretty much a loner?
The word probably described him well then. As good as he played on the field, he wasn't always a member of the team because of his other priorities. He was usually in and out very quickly. The other boys liked him, but he didn't reciprocate towards them. He stuck to himself very often.
Did you get to be friends with the other kids on the team?
No, not really. I just didn't spend any time with him, and my dad didn't want that.
Why not?
It's just part of his philosophy. If I started becoming friendly with these other players, I wouldn't be competitive.
If your team lost, would they all get together and go to the pizza parlor afterwards, even though they lost?
They would.
Did
often.
you get to go?
No. He was very belittling of the coach for allowing and the players to be going to pizza parlors to hang out after a loss. And he believed all through sports that the people that win are the ones that hate losing. You know, I had to look, and would purposely look, pretty devastated after matches. Pretty similar to that picture, then my dad would be satisfied, because he would be very angry. I was the most important thing in his life, and what I did was serious.
Was your brother as important to him as you were?
No. My brother was unimportant. And that was really all he cared about. And to some degree, I felt that was similar feelings from my grandparents and everybody around, that the focus seemed to be on me.
So you got a lot more attention than your brother, is that right?
I had his complete attention, and I don't think my brother, I didn't even think about my brother really didn't even exist for me until later in life. I don't think either of us thought about Eric too much.
So he was just ignored.
Just didn't seem to be very concerned with what was happening with Eric. He might, if he was in a bad mood, he might slap Eric or push Eric away. If he was in a good mood, he might hang out with Eric. But it was different. Like, I had to be doing something. I was achieving something.
How many hours a day were you playing tennis?
At 13?
Yes.
Probably like 40, 45 hours a week.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. 4 or 5 hours?
45, 40 hours a week.
And you're 13 and you're going to school also? Yes?
Yes. My dad would be buying the things he felt he wanted for me, and the guy behind the counter was very friendly. They'd had the place forever, and he knew me every time I came in my soccer clothes. Basically, he sneaked me in a bag, some pastries and cookies and stuff. He just sort of put it in with everything else my dad was buying, and I took it out when my dad wasn't looking.
Did your dad find him?
He found them on me outside the store.
Were you eating them?
I was eating them. Yes. He just grabbed them out of my hand, and he just grabbed me by the neck, and he just punched me in the stomach.
Did he say anything?
No, he dragged me to the car, and I don't believe that he said anything.
After you played soccer, would your dad talk to you about what your performance had been?
Yes.
And was it supportive, like you did a great thing today, or I'm really proud of you, or what would be the tone of those conversations?
No, he didn't believe in that. We worked on different aspects of the game. We would just focus on the other things that I should have done better. He just didn't believe in praise. He just felt that, you just have to keep going to the next level of play so we could get to where we wanted to go. That wasn't going to happen with wasting time, patting ourselves on the back, and, just losing our focus on what we had as a goal.
Did you feel like there was a lot of pressure to live up to your dad's expectations?
Tremendous pressure.
Did you think you could ever meet his expectations?
No. And I don't think he felt I could either.
And how old were you when you started playing tennis?
I started late, but I started about 6. My dad wanted me to use a full-size racket. And we would wrap the grip up a little bit higher, and I would hold the racket choked so that I could hold it
With 2 hands?
with 2 hands on both sides.
Were you too small to hold it with 1 hand?
Yes.
And when you were playing in tournaments, was your father there?
Yes, or he would fly in, and a lot of times I remember I would start the first couple points, and then I'd see my dad show up in a business suit, having just arrived.
Would you be glad to see him?
Yes. Whenever my dad was around, it was very heavy pressure, and I preferred to be just with the coach. But for some reason, when I was away from my dad, I had trouble playing. Sometimes I just couldn't play if my dad was not there, and I don't know, sometimes it was the nerves of just having to explain to him the match.
Would you have to tell him about the match?
Every game, exactly how the match progressed. I call him immediately. He wanted to know immediately. The tournaments, he was mostly at work, but I call him after practices, and I would be playing late, and he would get home and expect a call from either the coach or from me. He'd want everything, exactly the temperament.
Tell me what you would tell him.
I could hear my coach saying, he did real well. I know it was a close match, depending on whatever happened. Just describe the match, kind of. And then he'd say, your father wants to talk to you. And Dad would ask me to have the coach leave the room so he could talk to me in private. And he would say, tell me what happened. I heard this, what happened. I want to know. Because he would have, exactly what I was supposed to do for, the first almost 25 points, where I would just have a set strategy. And I'd explain to him how I followed those strategies, and he'd want to know why they didn't work out.
What is the Middle States Tennis Association? What area does that cover?
That's the 5 states, most of New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Delaware.
And how old were you when you were number 1 in that area?
I was 17, I think.
Was your dad proud of you? Had you finally done enough?
He was proud of me, but by the time I could get to be number 1, we were thinking nationally, and nationally I was not where he wanted me to be. So we didn't really worry about the 5 states thing.
So this wasn't a great moment for you then? Making a number 1 ranking in the Middle States Tennis Association was not that important?
He really didn't say much about it. It just happened. The rankings came up. I noticed I was number 1, but again, we were thinking nationally. It was so what?
Did your sports activities seem to take up all of your dad's free time?
It took up any time he wasn't working. Yeah.
And did your mother ever express any resentment about that?
Oh, yes, many, many times. She would say many things. She would say that I ruined her life, and she would explain to me why and how I ruined her life. If she wasn't in a tantrum and she was just speaking normally, she would just explain all the things that she could have been, an actress, broadcasting. I learned about her aspirations with disappointments with not being a child actress and wanting to go on in some acting or broadcasting sense. And then suddenly she had gotten pregnant, that she had not wanted to get pregnant, that my dad had then forced her, gave her an ultimatum, either you leave or you stay home with my son and quit. And so she chose to stay home, and essentially her life was pretty much ruined from that point on. How much money was being spent on my tennis, all my dad's time on my tennis, who cares? Then there would be other times when she was in a tantrum. Then it would just come out very, in a rage. She would be throwing things and screaming and flailing and wanting and trying to hit you and saying that you're a bastard. And she cursed a lot. That wait till your dad gets home, I'll tell him the things that you didn't do today, and I wish you were never born, and why can't you be like your brother, and what's the matter with you? And then I would try to say something. She would say, shut up, I don't want to hear it, you're stupid, I hate you.
How old were you when you heard things like, I wish you were never born?
You're stupid, I hate you.
How old were you when you heard things like, I wish you were never born?
So, 7.
Recess, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll resume at 15 minutes after the hour. Don't discuss this case with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it, and we'll resume at 3:15.
Were there also talks that took place in the basement?
Yes.
And did you have a basement both in Muncie and in Pennington?
Yes. Very early, like 6 years old, when I was swimming.
How close would you sit?
I would sit kind of hunched over, and my knees would be in between his knees, and he would be hunched over too, and our heads would be touching, and we would talk that way. Either we went over what I was going to do the next day if I had a match or practice, or there would be something that he was disturbed about. That he needed to. I would repeat phrases, and we basically go over the philosophy. I believe I was 7 or 8. I'm not sure. And at one point, I had a conversation with Jerry and his dad, and he would take Jerry aside after the coach finished talking to everybody, and he would sort of laugh and talk with Jerry. Sometimes I wander over in that direction, and my dad would usually call me back, say, I want to talk to you. And in the basement, my dad brought it up. He said, you know, you were over talking to Jerry and his dad. Well, what did I tell you about having friends? I said, he just wanted to talk to me about practicing after Dad. I think it's a good idea. He said, no. What I tell you about having friends. And then he'd say, let's go over it. And that's when we put our heads together. And that's when I would repeat to him phrases from his books. That time I repeated a phrase, or I would just sit there and he would say, tell me what I told you about friends. And I would say, I have to constantly struggle because there are forces that tear me down, and sometimes they be disguised in the form of a smile or the hand of a friend. It was a quote from the book. He would repeat it, then I would repeat it, and he would repeat it, and then I would repeat it, and he would say, good. This was very trance-like. I usually had my eyes closed, and his forehead was on my head, and we would just repeat things in this voice. Sometimes his voice would get harder if he was trying to emphasize, or if he didn't like what I was saying, he would just bump my head like that, and I'd try to go back and do it again. And we would do that for a long time. In Muncie, it would be like over an hour, I would say at least, because he would take me through the whole match the next day. I will master my emotions. I will be the master of my emotions. Was very important. I will be master of my emotions. Today, I will be master of my emotions. If I feel depressed, I will sing. If I feel sad, I will laugh. If I feel ill, I will double my labor. If I feel fear, I will plunge ahead. If I feel inferior, I will wear new garments. If I feel poverty, I will think of wealth to come. If I feel insignificant, I will remember my goals. I will be master of my emotions. It was really crucial to Dad, and a great sign of weakness to display emotion, happy or sad, as there's another passage I don't remember as well about being too happy, too confident, too pleased with yourself. and to remember your failures and things of that sort. So neither one. Somebody just unemotional that you couldn't read.
You said that he talked about flaws with walking. Did you have a problem with the way you walked at
Yes.
some point in time?
Yes,
When?
I still do, I think. The feet outward.
And besides talking to you about it as a goal, as a flaw to be corrected, how else did he deal with this flaw of yours?
Anything like that he made fun of in our family. The walking, he would walk behind me and make quacking noises and say I walk like a duck, and get Eric to make quacking noises.
Would this be done on a public street
Yes?
with people around?
Yes.
Did that embarrass you?
Yes.
What other flaws did he set as goals to be corrected?
Speech.
What was wrong with your speech?
I didn't enunciate properly. That's what he said countless times. And I also sometimes stuttered because I just couldn't respond because I'd be so tense. To make fun of it,
What would he say?
he'd just stutter back. And sometimes he would send me in a room and say, come back when I can talk. Sometimes he would just stutter. Sometimes he would just wait. And I would just keep trying, keep trying to get the words out. And he knew what I wanted to say. And he just let me go on. With me, it was mostly a tendency to cry or look sad. But I have to master my emotions. And he really it offended, I don't know if it offended him, but he had a strong reaction to tears.
Any problem with bedwetting?
Yes.
Until how old?
14. Did lots of things. Just made fun of me.
What would he say?
Say you're a sissy like your brother. He'd just be totally disgusted. Didn't want to talk to me. Sometimes we'd skip practices if my mom had said that I wet my bed. And sometimes it would just upset him so much, he would explode. And, I would get beaten for it.
With regard to Mrs. Menendez, did she seem to have a different relationship with Lyle than she had with Eric?
Yes.
Did she seem to be closer to Eric than she was to Lyle?
Yes.
Did she, in fact, openly express to you that she disliked Lyle?
In the latter parts of her life.
She actually said she disliked him.
Yes.
Cool. Do you remember her being gentle and affectionate with you?
She was never gentle and affectionate with me. Like I said before, I felt that she hated me, and that's what she told me all the time. I was in the airport with my little brother. I was like, I don't know if I was 5 years old. And I was there with all the luggage with my mom, and I had my brother either on my knee or sitting next to me. She's just left. And I called after her, and she just left. And I waited by the luggage with my brother, and she was lost in basically the people that were shuffling around, and she just disappeared. She was gone for a long period of time. I don't know, I was panicking. I wasn't sure whether to go try and find her after a while, or I was take my brother with me. And I just decided that if I left the luggage, my dad would find out, so I just stayed there. And seemed like an amazing amount of time later, she came back. You know, my brother was crying, and I didn't want to say anything, so I just didn't say anything. She was very reactionary, and she could try to hit me or just yell and scream or go off, and I really never volunteered something like that. Yeah, I went to shopping malls with her all the time. She would leave, my brother and I, sometimes we would just stay in the car. I remember being in the car while she shopped for hours.
What age?
Till I was about 10 years old, 11 years old. We went in between the cars. And then a lot of times she would bring me in, and then she would get lost. We would be following her around, and she would be walking quickly, and she would just leave a store and go into another store. And I would try to keep track of her and play with my brother. These were big malls, and I rarely could find her. I would look, and then I would go back to the same store and hope she would come back. The storekeeper would ask a suspicious question, "Where's your mother?" Because I was only like, I was under 10 years old, and I would not have an answer. They would come pick me up. This happened at lots of different malls. They would come pick me up, and we would just wait there.
When you say we, is this you and your brother?
My brother and I. I would say my name, and they would page my mother. And always, she would wait until she was done, and then she would pick me up on the way out. Anywhere from an hour or two. She would shop for a few hours, and I would know we were going to be there for a long time. I was very scared of her making fun of me, and, I just wish that my mother had come back sooner.
How many times do you think that happened?
It happened a lot of times, but I don't really know how many times. But
More than 5?
Much more than 5.
More than 10?
More than 10.
How would it make you feel all these times when she was late?
I just felt that she didn't care.
Would sometimes there be punishment for things that you didn't know what you had done wrong?
Yes.
And you talked before about your mother's tantrums or rages. Did your mother have tantrums or rages?
Yes.
And how far back do you remember seeing that kind of behavior by your mother?
Since I can remember. No.
Did they get worse as time went on? Say
Yes.
And what would she be like when she was in a rage?
She would just be completely out of control, screaming, grabbing things off counters and shelves and breaking them, throwing things around the sometimes come after you, sometimes run away. Just a complete explosion. Just completely tense and
You just think,
ready to, explosion is the only word I can think, just ready to really, like she's trying to hold back and is not able. Yeah, she would use her fists against you, and her veins would bulge out and her face would clench.
You've heard people describe your mother when she was irrational and out of control, have you not?
Mm-hmm.
And they describe this grimace and the fists and that whole thing.
Yeah, she used to clench her fists and her whole face would turn red.
You've seen it. And you saw it over the course of your life?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Her arms would flail. And she would just be out of control and she'd be running around, either hiding or I just stood there and not move. Sometimes Eric would run out of the room.
In the Muncie house, when she would go into these rages, do you remember the things she would say?
Yes. He would say that you're a bastard, you ruined her life, you're ungrateful. How can you use that tone of voice with me when I clean up after you all day? Wait till your dad gets home. I'm going to tell him how lazy you've been today. You're a terrible boy.
Would she use that tone of voice?
No.
Would she speak louder than that?
She'd speak louder, and my mother cursed a lot. It was terrifying, and it was confusing. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. You just didn't know why. You'd just explode constantly. And you'd just be walking around the house like this because my mother could go off like that and you could be hurt. She could throw things at you. Sometimes she'd grab me when I was little and hold me on the ground in awkward positions. Grab me upstairs and put me underneath her bed. You just never knew what was going to happen, so you were just scared and you were just tense.
Would this be a punishment?
I don't know if you use the word punishment. These were just, you did these things on a regular basis when she exploded, and one of them was putting me under the bed. Till before my dad came home.
What
I'd be under there for all afternoon, early evening.
What was it like underneath the bed?
It was claustrophobic. It was only about this high, and I just had enough room to get under. You couldn't turn over. And the ferret went to the bathroom all under there, so the whole area was never cleaned. It was like a urine smell. And it was terrible, and that's why she put me there. This happened often.
What about the dinner table? You heard your brother describe what he was put through at the dinner table. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And did that sound right to you? Is that what you recall happening at the dinner table to your brother?
Yeah, it was much worse than he described, but it was bad.
Much worse for him?
Yes. Lyle was in Mom's bedroom. He was on this side of the bed, and he had stepped on a needle, and I just heard him cry out. And I came in and I saw the needle sticking out of both sides of his big toe, and it really scared me. Well, he was crying and screaming, and so I ran and got Mom, and she was on the phone. And this time I didn't care. I was just pulling on her arm, asking her to come because Lyle was in pain and Lyle had a needle in his foot. And she pushed me away and she said, "I'll be there in a minute."
And did she come right away?
No.
And did you have to go back again?
Yes, I was begging for her to come because Lyle wasn't moving. He had his foot right in the air, and it was...
Well, Mr. Menendez, did you have an opportunity when you were quite young to observe the relationship between your brother and your mother?
Yes.
What was it like?
She disliked him. She hated him. There was a lot of tension, and she didn't care.
What is it that you saw or heard that led you to conclude that your mother hated your brother?
Just what she would say to him. She would say similar things to me, but just so often to Lyle. She would blame him for things that he didn't do to Dad because she didn't want to get in trouble. Just the way she treated Lyle, I knew that she didn't like Lyle.
On an average day, did she appear in the mornings to be angry with Lyle?
Yes. Whenever she couldn't find anything or really was late or this, and Lyle was there, she'd always blame Lyle. She'd always say, it's your fault, you're making me busy, you make me too frustrated, I don't have time with you around. No, I knew he wasn't responsible, but I figured that was just my mother.
And how did you feel about this?
I felt bad for Lyle.
What would it be like when she was helping Eric with his homework? And are we talking about Muncie now, your memories, or Pennington?
Pennington. He'd be writing, and she would just be watching like this. And as soon as he made a mistake, she'd take the paper and she'd go, "God, do it again! Do it again!" She would wait like about 10 seconds, and she'd grab the thing again, and she'd just crumple it up, and she'd slam it down again, and then she'd just start hitting. And just on the back of the head and his back, and he was supposed to keep writing. And I remember one time my dad walked in, and I don't think he had any idea that sometimes that these things were going on in the house, because he was in shock. And my brother looked at him and he was crying, and I told him later that, "You gotta do something for my mom." Because she was out of control. He said to just avoid her, and that she was not a rational person. Just avoid her. And that's what I did. She walked around with a stopwatch, like the swimming stopwatches that we used to use and no longer did. And she would say, "Time's up." And then she would check all the answers and see how many he got right. And they would just go back and forth like this. This happened every day that he had school.
How did you feel about what was happening to your brother when you would watch her working with him?
I felt helpless, and like I wanted my dad to do something.
Did your mom seem strange to you?
She was very strange. There were times when she was, it seemed like she was just off in another world. She would not respond to you. She would just be like sprawled out on the floor, rearranging marbles, rubber bands, putting cards together, taking them out, making them into different stacks. There was a little drawer off the kitchen that she had all these things in. Sometimes she would be playing with dirt in the... It was like she was repotting the plants again and again. She was just gone. She wasn't there. It got very, very bad in Pennington. There were a lot of other... it wasn't just that type of state. She would be in different kinds also, but it would get worse. And then in Calabasas, it seemed to me to be even worse. And I wasn't there as much, and my brother was calling me, telling me what was going on.
Did your mother ever do anything violent to you in these rages?
Yes. Just beating me with her hands and kicking me on the ground. Dragging me by the hair down to my room, which my dad did sometimes that way also, and I would just defend myself until she left. And then in Pennington, she'd throw things at you. One time, she chased me around the house with one of the kitchen knives, and didn't actually get me, but I would be in my room for all day, and which was part of the problem because I was supposed to have a schedule, and if my mom punished me and put me in the room, then I couldn't keep the schedule. So my dad would come home and be furious.
What did you do when you had to go to the bathroom?
I went to the bathroom in the room, either out the window, and she gave me like a Tupperware. It was more like one of those hospital vomiting things. I kept it under the bed, and that's what I used if I needed to go to the bathroom.
When they were sent to their room, what was it, you go to your room for 10 minutes, or is it a set
Oh,
period
no.
of time?
Oh, no. There was never a short-term discipline as far as being locked in your room. There was always long-term, 1 hour minimum, day maximum.
Did you have occasion to help them clean their room one time?
Oh, yes. I'm a very meticulous person, so I would take it upon myself to try to educate that with them.
Did they share a room?
Yes, they did. I found a Tupperware container under the bed.
And what was in the Tupperware container?
Feces remnants.
Was there a time where you upset your mother as she was preparing dinner and she cut herself?
Yes.
How old were you?
11. And I think I said her name, and she was doing something in the kitchen, and she cut her hand, and she ran over, and she pushed me against the glass, and she rubbed her hand in my face.
Did she get blood on you?
Oh yeah, her hand was a mess, and my face was a mess, and I ate dinner that way.
Why did you eat dinner that way? Why didn't you wash it off?
I went to wash it off. She said, no, just leave it, just eat. And I thought I was going to have to go to school like that, but by the end of the evening, she let me wash it off. No, these things wouldn't happen if my dad was home.
Inappropriately attired?
She would be topless. Usually just topless or like an open robe. And sometimes, with her clothes on. I was about 11.
She help you with your baths?
Yes.
How would she help you with your baths?
She would come in after I'd been in there a while. She would help wash my hair and wash me with a sponge. Same, 11 to like 11 to 13. She would wash me everywhere.
She would wash your genitals?
Yes.
You slept in bed with your mom a lot, didn't you, even when you were little?
Yes.
And did you continue to sleep in her bed around this time when you're 11 and 12?
Sometimes.
Did you touch your mom?
Yes.
Would your dad be in bed?
Sometimes.
And where would you touch her?
Everywhere. She kissed me, but she didn't touch me.
And how long did these things go on for?
Until I was 13, a little bit farther than that.
Was she nicer to you than she used to be?
No. She was worse. It stopped a few months after I was 13.
Who stopped it?
I did. She was furious and, she couldn't be too much worse, but she harassed me and we just sort of had arguments about and problems about that for a long time.
Your relationship with your mother was never good before that, is that correct?
No.
Was it worse after that?
Oh, yeah, she was just, she was pretty much zeroed in on me after that. I don't know, she felt rejected. I don't know what she felt exactly, but it was a constant attacking. I was very angry. I thought that it was unfair.
Why was it unfair?
Because we were doing this and she was enjoying it, and I was hoping that things were going to get better for our whole relationship, and things might get better. I took it to be love, and that's what I want.
Did you always have problems with her after that about your girlfriends?
I always had problems with her, with my girlfriends, yes. She harassed me.
What do you mean she harassed you?
She just kept exposing herself, picking me up at the clubs with, in a robe, exposed, leaving her underwear around, calling me into the room when she knew that she was, changing. Sometimes she would be in a tantrum, and then she'd come over and she would touch my face real gentle, like she was going to kiss me, and then she would go back into a rage. And she was very upset.
Christy was a very pretty model, is that right?
She was pretty.
And was she nice?
Yeah, she was like an angel.
And did your mom like her?
My mom just despised her.
This is 1989, the spring.
Is that a question?
This is spring 1989 is the time.
It was.
Yes. This is spring 1989.
She called her the same names that my dad did. My dad didn't like Christy either, and called her a slut and a bimbo and a gold digger and just a country girl. Well, she thought she was AIDS infected.
What was that based on?
That she was a model. And so she wouldn't let me eat at the table. So I ate on paper plates in the day.
In this period of time, 1986 to 1989, did you speak with your brother regularly on the phone?
Yes.
And was it the same over this period of time, or did it change? I mean, did you always speak to him with the same degree of frequency from 1986 to 1989? Or?
I spoke to him a lot in the fall of '86.
Now, during the fall of '86, you said you spoke to him a lot. Is that correct?
Right.
Was there any particular reason why you were speaking to him more often then?
Yes.
Why was that?
Because my mother was having problems. He was telling me that he was constantly hysterical at times, crying, very nervous, continually telling me about my mom's sometimes problems with my dad, mostly just her own rages and problems with alcohol. He would tell me bizarre things. One time when he found blood on her sheets in her bedroom, we talked about that and what that could be. Her going through his things. He would just find his bedroom in a way that somebody had gone through it. I felt extremely bad that I was far away and that I couldn't be there. And
Why? Why did you feel badly you were far away and couldn't be there?
Because it seemed like we had always been emotionally there for each other, and I seemed far away.
At some point, did you get a call from your brother Eric that he'd found a particular letter that
Yes.
was upsetting to him?
Yes.
So this would have been fall of '86?
Right.
And what did your brother tell you? Did your brother read a letter to you?
Yes.
And was that letter written by your mother?
Yes. Basically he said that she had no other way out, that she couldn't handle the shame of a divorce from Dad. She was sorry that she had to take this way out, and that she was leaving. And she realized that Jose, my dad, never loved her, and got what he needed from Louise, and she couldn't give it to him, and she was tired of it, so she was checking out. Well, I thought it was clearly a suicide letter. She wasn't just leaving town, and my brother didn't realize that at first, and I felt I should tell him that's what I thought it was. Well, I told Eric that I would to put the letter. He had just found it, and so I told him to just put it back where he found it on the coffee table thing with the books, and pretend that he hadn't found it. I would talk to Mom, and we would try to lift her spirits and tell her that we would side with her in a divorce and let her realize that that's what she should do.
Did she express appreciation for your concern?
No, she was just extremely upset and accusatory that I was trying to break up her marriage. How could I suggest that she was unhappy? She said she never regretted a day of being married to my father. She said that she was taking, this was at my Aunt Terry's house, and she said that she was taking 13 pills a day, and she showed them to me. She told me that I had to start doing better and stop upsetting my dad so much because he was coming down on her, and the whole thing was causing her so much stress. She was having to take these pills. It was actually a nice conversation.
What was nice about it?
Well, she was, my mother never reached out to me, and she came to me and said, and she looked very, very sad, and wanted my help to help her not have to take these pills, basically. And I tried to tell her that, I thought things would be fine, and I knew there was because of Louise. And
But she was saying it was because of you.
right, but
Why was that nice?
because she was reaching out to me.
You almost got away with it, didn't you?
You characterize it that way, and you think it's funny. But my brother and my life was very miserable for 6 months before we got arrested, and obviously wasn't better after we got arrested, and isn't good now, and it never really has been great.
You had a fairly unfortunate childhood. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. And that I think it's fair to say that your father was tyrannical, correct?
Fair to say that.
And your mother, from the picture that's been painted by your relatives and by you as well, was, I think it's fair to say, disturbed, correct?
Yes.
When your mother used to have these rages that you've talked about, and she would throw things, and, is that yes?
Yes.
Did that make you angry that she was doing that?
No, my mom's rages didn't make me angry. They hurt me. They made me very confused, and I wanted to help her, and I was definitely the source of the rage, and I was trying to fix that somehow.
When did she make these threats to poison herself and everybody else?
In 1987, and then in Beverly Hills.
How would that happen, that he would refuse to eat the food that was served?
He would just suddenly, right before the meal was about to be served, tell Eric and I that we were going out to eat. And my mom would, the time I remember there, my mom would be furious. You know, obviously we ate at the house, but there were just some days when my dad felt she might do something based on the way she was acting that day or things they had said. So we would all leave.
So how would you know when it was okay to eat the food?
We would just rely on my dad.
Had she ever expressed in front of your dad the fact that she hated you or you'd ruined her life? Had she ever said those things in front of your dad before?
No,
And was she saying them during this period of time?
frequently.
And what would he do?
He would do nothing.
When she's saying these things to you, that she hates you and that you've ruined her life, how did you feel?
I felt just confused and
Did it hurt?
Yeah, it hurt. I hope everything's all right at home with Dad and Eric. I miss you all. I miss you all. I will write very soon again, so check the mailbox. Love you, Mom, Lyle.
When you wrote that letter to her, were those true feelings?
Yes.
Did you love your mom?
Yes.
Were you worried about her?
Yes.
When she told you that she was taking these 13 pills a day, why did she say she was taking them?
She said she was taking them because she needed them to get through the day. That she was having trouble controlling herself and in a lot of pain. She said that it was my fault because I was stressing my dad out.
Did that make you feel good or bad?
It made me feel very bad and sorry and wanting to understand her. It was a very strange conversation because it was an unusual conversation. Just
Unusual in what way?
First time she ever acknowledged that she had a problem to me. At this point, I was trying to have a conversation with her because she was in the den and seemed a little more relaxed, but she just exploded. At some point, she was moving toward me, and I kind of put my arms up because she flails with her fists sort of wildly, and she reached and she grabbed my hairpiece, and she just ripped it off. Well, it was pain, because you're supposed to use this blue chemical to detach it, and I mean, you can rip it off, but you know, I looked in the mirror, my head was welling up, and my eyes had tears in them from the pain. You know, being there in the house without it and her having ripped it off was just unbelievably embarrassing. And then my brother was there also, and she threw it back to me, and my brother was just sort of standing there. More my mother's, just that she would do that. Had never happened before, and she had rages before close to me, hitting me, and so I left. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to talk to my brother, so I left.
Why didn't you want to talk to your brother?
Well, he didn't know I had a hairpiece, and so you know, my brother and I, there are things we don't talk about, and that was one of them.
Were you embarrassed in front of your brother?
I was completely embarrassed in front of my brother.
When you came out, did you have a conversation with him?
Yes.
And did you talk about your mom or the hairpiece? Or what was the conversation?
He wanted to talk to me, and I could tell something was wrong. He was sitting on the sofa, real timid. His head was down, and I came in, he kind of looked up at me, and he looked down, and he said, "I want to talk to you." He was very sad about the fact that he said we weren't a family because there were so many secrets, and that basically saying that, you know, he had never known about my hairpiece, which I knew, and that he was sorry that happened, and that he wished he had known, and I didn't have to be embarrassed. And
How did it make you feel when he was trying to comfort you this way?
not good, embarrassed. And I was more the person, he mostly came to me, and when he had problems, and you know, like the gang thing or whatever it was, there were problems, he would come to me. He asked, you know, he went on about how we weren't a family and that I was the only person he had. And he asked me to remember back to the time when I confronted my dad about him. And, you know, I remembered. I said yes. And I asked him what was wrong, because he was really didn't want to. It was like, you know, he was basically shaking, and I asked him what was the matter, and at some point he couldn't tell me, and he just started crying, and I said, you know, you could tell me, what is it? And he told me that those things with his dad were still going on, and I was just completely not believing. I said, what things? He said, you know what things? I said, how come you didn't tell me before? I said a lot of nasty things to him, basically.
What did you say to him?
I asked him if he liked it. I asked him why he didn't tell me a long time ago. I asked him why he didn't fight back, because he said that Dad was forced. He was just crying. I had no answers for any of it. Just crying.
Were you mean to him?
Unintentionally.
But you were mean?
Yes. And that made me, I don't know, if I was feeling extremely guilty. I was feeling guilty because, I had, the 13-year-old conversation I had just sort of let go. And I never really followed up on it. I just kind of let it go. And he told me this, and I was kind of like, and he didn't say that, but I felt like, why didn't I do anything about it?
Like he was blaming you somehow?
Maybe. He wasn't, but I felt that way.
Were you blaming you?
Yes. And also feeling guilty when I asked him if he liked it.
What did he do when you asked him if he liked it?
What did he do?
Yes.
He said, of course he didn't like it. He was crying. And I told him, I believed him. And I did believe him.